The following video is brought to you by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or even an online store, make it with Squarespace. A couple weeks ago, the new iPad Air came out, the first Air we've seen since 2014. The device has the same processor as the iPhone XS, looks nearly identical to the previous 10.5-inch iPad Pro, and serves as a middle-tier option for those looking to get an iPad. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're going to be talking about the iPad Air, and why it's the iPad you should buy. I was a bit skeptical when I heard Apple was releasing a new iPad Air and Mini, but not updating the cheaper, older iPad, as in the lowest model they're selling right now. I was happy that there would be a new Mini, as that was a device that desperately needed an upgrade, but the Air kind of took me by surprise. However, the more I thought about it, the more it kind of just started to make sense. While the iPad Pro is amazing, it's expensive, with a starting price of $800. And the regular iPad is pretty good, especially at only $330, but it does feel like the cheaper device, with only the A10 chipset and a display that isn't laminated. The iPad mini, while only $100 more than the cheapest iPad, isn't really a good replacement for the cheapest iPad for most people, as it's kind of more for a different market. You know, for people who want a tablet, but a small tablet. So without the Air, you'd be going straight up to the iPad Pro from the regular iPad. But the iPad Air, only $100 up from the iPad mini, now this was starting to make sense. The iPad Pro, again, is amazing, but it isn't practical. USB-C is great and all, and it's the future, but most Apple users would rather a Lightning port so that all their old chargers would work. No home button and only Face ID is really cool, but some people would rather just stick with what's familiar. And no headphone jack in the Pro iPad really is a bitter pill to swallow. But this iPad Air is a device that offers almost the same performance as the iPad Pro, but at a much more reasonable price tag of only $500. It might not have that 120Hz display, but most people don't even know what that means. I would argue that the iPad Air is the iPad Pro for the everyday person. Most of us don't need all those flashy features with the newest iPad Pro, and the Air is going to be more than sufficient. I think one of the bigger drawbacks is actually the mediocre speakers. But hey, at least it has a headphone jack. This iPad is perfect for those who want an iPad, but don't just want the cheap one. If you're on a budget, the 2018 iPad is great, but this one is going to last a lot longer and is just overall going to be the more pleasant experience. The iPad Air is, in my opinion, the iPad everyone should buy. It's fast, fairly priced, and if you've been eyeing iPads for a while now, this is the perfect time to jump on board. This was the conclusion I came to when the iPad Air first came out. Now, this was fine and all, but talking a big game doesn't really mean much. The Air looked good on paper, but how did it really perform? As soon as the new iPad Air was in stock at my local Apple retailer, I went in, bought it in space gray, and left. A few days later, I also bought the Apple Pencil, and I've ordered the smart keyboard case from Amazon, although that hasn't come in yet. So impressions, how does the iPad perform? Does it hold up to expectations? Well, yeah, actually it kind of does. This is a really solid tablet, and I've had almost no complaints. This device is essentially the old iPad Pro, but with a downgraded screen when it comes to the refresh rate, and of course those darn speakers. But I can live with that considering I got it brand new, as opposed to buying one used off Craigslist, and it has the better processor. Before we get into everything I love about this iPad, we'll talk about some of the drawbacks to it. Now, for me, not all of these apply, such as the camera, which I'll talk about in a sec, but they might be problems for you, so I'm going to mention them anyway. So firstly, the camera. It's 8 megapixels, and about as mediocre as you can get. This picture of flowers here, this is the same picture taken on my iPhone XS. I realize the iPhone is literally double the price of the iPad Air, but I find it amusing it also takes about double the photo. This is a fairly pitiful attempt by the iPad. The colors are just awful and I couldn't get them to show up correctly. But honestly, I don't really care. This is me personally, and just my opinion, but I think if you have an iPad, I really don't see why you need to take photos with it. It's impractical and uncomfortable to hold up and take a photo, and why not just pull out your smartphone? Most smartphones from the last 4 years or so are going to take take better pictures than this iPad will. With that in mind, I think the camera is serviceable. I could see the odd occasion where it could be helpful to take a photo. Maybe you don't have access to your phone, or you're using an app that integrates the camera in some way. The camera is nice to have, and at least it's not awful, but it should by no means be your primary shooter. The selfie camera is actually surprisingly good. It has 7 megapixels, the same count as the iPhone XS, and while it might not take photos as well, it still does a pretty darn fine job. Definitely better than most iPads we've seen in the past. For FaceTime or whatever you need the selfie camera for, the iPad Air will more than do the job. So other downsides with the iPad Air? Well, some might consider the lack of Face ID a downside, but I think many would prefer the home button anyway, so it kind of evens out. The second generation Apple Pencil unfortunately isn't compatible, meaning you have to use the first one. Not that it's much worse, just less convenient because it charges so awkwardly. Besides these relatively minor complaints, the iPad Air is great, and I can't think of any more problems. I can, however, think of the many benefits to getting one. The A12 processor gives out basically the same amount of power as the iPad Pro. This is a device that'll last years fully supported without slowing down. While there's only first generation Apple Pencil support, that pencil is still pretty great, charging aside. I used it for final exam notes and had no complaints. It really is a solid product. As mentioned before, there is a smart connector for Apple's keyboard, which will make it convenient for typing up reports or whatever you need to do. The base model comes with 64 gigs, or you can go up to 256 gigs. I think that's enough for the vast majority of iPad users. If you really need more space, you should probably go up to the iPad Pro anyways. The screen might have a lower refresh rate than the Pro, but it's still gorgeous and one of the best displays on a tablet being sold right now. It's bright and crisp and features Apple's True Tone technology, which changes the color appropriately depending on the environment, so everything looks nice and natural. The battery life is impressive and will last you multiple days of moderate to heavy use. They say up to 10 hours of watching video or browsing the web or whatever, and from my experience that sounds about right. And the best thing about this iPad, it's very affordable at only $500. That might sound like a lot, but considering the iPhone XS has the same processor and is double the cost, it really isn't that bad. And scratch what I just said, the best thing about this iPad is longevity. Apple has been very good with supporting their devices for long times, and I think we can assume this iPad will be no exception. Judging by past patterns, I think we can safely assume this iPad will be fully supported until at least 2023 or 2024. That's 5 years of use from a $500 product, and suddenly that number doesn't seem so daunting. While the 2018 9.7-inch lower model iPad isn't a bad device by any means, an upgrade to it could be looming, and it's gonna get slower a lot faster than the Air is. For $330, it's a steal, but personally I'd pay the $170 more for the better performance and longer future. This is the iPad Pro for the average user. All the punch with none of the drawbacks of using USB-C or the full screen design. Plus, it's $300 cheaper, which is a nice benefit. But that's just my opinion, and I'm some random guy on the internet. And before we conclude this video and I give some of my final thoughts, we have a quick word from today's sponsor, Squarespace. Huge shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Squarespace is an all-online platform with award-winning customer service that allows you to create gorgeous, professional websites easier than ever. With Squarespace, you get an unending number of templates and a very simple but powerful online editor. You never have to update or install anything. Just go to squarespace.com/91tech and you can immediately start building your site. Whatever it is you need, it's never been more simple than to make it with Squarespace. Make sure you head over to squarespace.com/91tech and use promo code 91tech for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So to wrap things up here, the iPad Air is absolutely worth buying right now, and I actually think it's the best iPad you should buy right now for most people. This is the perfect time considering it just came out, and so if you've been on the fence, I honestly can't recommend it enough. Again, I've personally been using it for, a few weeks now, and I've really been liking it. It's great for streaming media, which is mostly what I use it for, as well as web browsing or reading articles or going on Reddit. This tablet is actually more convenient than I originally thought. I have a laptop, so I thought, well, probably don't need one, but actually, I'm finding this iPad to be quite useful. But what do you think? Is it worth the money? Do you have one, or are you considering getting one? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video or found it interesting, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, links to that below, and another big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Make sure you use that link at the top of the description and promo code 91tech for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. With that all being said, I'm Josh from 91tech, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.